Jean Piaget cognitive development. When we think about how children grow and learn, we often imagine them simply picking up knowledge from adults or schools. But Jean Piaget, a Swiss psychologist, showed us that learning is far more complex than that. He believed that children are not just empty containers waiting to be filled with information but active explorers of the world, who build their understanding step by step. His theory of cognitive development explains how children's thinking changes as they grow, and it has become one of the most influential ideas in psychology and education. Cognitive development simply means the way children develop their ability to think, reason, and make sense of the world. Piaget's theory helps us see that children think differently at different ages, and each stage of development allows them to handle new kinds of problems. Piaget argued that development happens through stages that follow a fixed order. Every child passes through the stages, although the exact age may vary slightly from one child to another. The first stage is the sensorimotor stage, which covers birth to around 2 years old. At this point, babies are learning mainly through their senses and actions. They touch, grab, shake, put things in their mouths, and explore everything around them. One important achievement in this stage is something called object permanence. This means the child realizes that objects continue to exist even when they cannot see them. Before this, if a toy disappears from sight, the baby thinks it no longer exists. Once they develop object permanence, they understand that the toy is still there, even if hidden under a blanket. This seems simple, but it is a huge mental leap. The second stage is called the preoperational stage, from about 2 to 7 years old. Children now start using language, imagination, and symbols. They can pretend that a stick is a sword or a doll is a real baby. Their world becomes filled with play and creativity. However, Piaget noticed that children in this stage are often egocentric, meaning they see the world mainly from their own point of view. For example, if you ask a 4-year-old to describe what someone else sees from the other side of the table, they may still describe their own perspective instead. They also struggle with logical thinking. For instance, if you pour water from a short, wide glass into a tall, thin one, a child in this stage might say the tall glass has more water, even though the amount is the same. They focus on appearances rather than underlying logic. The third stage is the concrete operational stage, from about 7 to 11 years old. At this point, children start to think more logically about concrete objects and events. They understand the idea of conservation, which means they know that quantity does not change even if the shape of something changes. For example, they now realize that the water in the tall glass and the short glass is the same amount. They can also perform mental operations like addition, subtraction, and categorization. They start to understand cause and effect more clearly. However, their thinking is still tied to things they can see and touch. Abstract or hypothetical ideas are still difficult for them to grasp. The final stage is the formal operational stage, which begins around age 12 and continues into adulthood. At this stage, people develop the ability to think abstractly and reason about hypothetical situations. They can imagine possibilities, test ideas mentally, and consider different outcomes before acting. For example, a teenager can understand concepts like justice, freedom, or scientific theories that go beyond immediate reality. They are capable of systematic problem solving, meaning they can plan experiments, test variables, and draw logical conclusions. This stage opens the door to critical thinking, creativity, and complex reasoning. Piaget also introduced the idea that children build knowledge through processes called assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation happens when children fit new experiences into what they already know. For example, a child who knows about dogs may call a cat a dog because it has 4 legs and fur. Accommodation happens when the child realizes that cats are different from dogs and adjusts their understanding. Together, assimilation and accommodation form what Piaget called adaptation, the process by which children learn and grow mentally. One of the strengths of Piaget's theory is that it highlighted the active role of children in their own development. Instead of being passive learners, children are curious scientists who constantly test, explore, and revise their understanding. His theory also had a huge influence on education. Teachers and parents learned that you cannot expect a child to understand something they are not developmentally ready for. For example, you cannot teach abstract algebra to a 5-year-old because their brain is not yet prepared to handle abstract reasoning. Education based on Piaget's theory focuses more on hands-on learning, exploration, and activities that match the child's developmental stage. At the same time, Piaget's theory has faced some criticism. Some researchers believe he underestimated the abilities of young children, since later studies showed that children can sometimes understand concepts earlier than Piaget suggested. Others argue that development may not be as strictly stage-based as he described, and that growth can be more continuous and influenced by culture and social interaction. Despite these debates, Piaget's work remains a foundation in psychology and education because it gave us a framework to understand how human thinking evolves. In everyday life, Piaget's ideas help parents and teachers better understand children. For example, if a toddler insists that the moon follows them wherever they go, it is not because they are silly but because of the way their mind is working at that stage. When a child struggles with sharing, it is often because they are still learning to see things from another person's perspective. When a teenager argues about fairness or justice, it shows they are developing abstract reasoning. These behaviors are not random but part of a natural process of cognitive growth. To sum up, Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development gives us a map of how children learn to think, reason, and understand the world as they grow. From the sensorimotor world of a baby, through the imaginative and symbolic thinking of early childhood, to the logical problem-solving of school-age children, and finally to the abstract reasoning of adolescence. Each stage is a step in the journey of human intelligence. His work shows us that learning is not just about teaching facts but about guiding children through experiences that help them construct knowledge for themselves. If you enjoyed this explanation of Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development in simple terms and found it helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you support our efforts to bring more clear and easy-to-understand explanations of complex ideas. Your encouragement means a lot and motivates us to keep creating content that makes learning enjoyable for everyone.